It's time for us to check back in with Verna Mae and see what happens next. If you missed the first reading, you can look in the description below for a playlist. That evening, we had all sat on the porch in the twilight. Uncle Will told us lots of jokes and pranks that he and my father had gotten into. Well, you see, it was like this. Kit and I was in jail for something. I guess being in a fight with someone or other, or maybe for being drunk. Anyway, he was the only one in jail at that time. Jailer Isom, that's our uncle, he was jailer then, and he had to go to Catlettsburg for some reason, and he appointed me as deputy to take care of the jail and courthouse. Well, it was fodder pulling time of year, and Kit and I sure was worried. Afraid Morrell and Vince and the other young'uns would not get the fodder saved in time. So I told him to go on home and be back before Jailer Isom got back from Catlettsburg. Everything would have been fine, but you know what? The jailer came back one day before we was looking for him. He come and got the keys that night. I was scared. I didn't know what to do, so I thought up this joke. Now Jim Smith, he had this old Jenny, always run loose all over town, and I took that Jenny and put it in the cell where Kit and I was supposed to be. I sure would have loved to have seen Uncle Isom's face when he started to give Kit and I his breakfast next morning. Aunt Nance said, "Yeah, and what about the time you all was up at Aunt Kate's and you got to cutting up so much she told you to take the door and leave, and you did. Took the door right off the pegs and carried it on your back away up the road. Good thing it was summertime or poor Aunt Kate and her young'uns would have froze." "Yeah," Uncle Will answered her, "but we went back next day and hung her door back for her." And then I remembered the time we got Matt to run through the town without any clothes on. You see, me and Kit and I made it up to do this. We'd been walking all day and was real tired. And just before we got into town, I said to Kit and I, "Let's all pull off and take a dip in the creek here before we get inside of folks' houses." Matt agreed at once, and he did not notice that me and Kit and I was a little slow in pulling our things off. Soon as we seed that Matt was naked as a jaybird, Kit and I throwed a rock in the bushes back of us and hollered, "Look, Will, there's a bear! Run for your life!" Poor Matt, he did not take time to look. We all started out running right through the town we went. Matt was way ahead of us. Folks began coming to their doors to see what was going on. Everybody shouted, "What's wrong? What's happening?" Kit and I said, "It's our brother. He's lost his mind, crazy as a Bessie bug. Help us to catch him." Soon several men were running after Matt and soon caught him. He kept trying to tell them the truth, but the more that he said, the more they thought he was crazy. Poor Matt. He was Ma's baby one. She never got over him getting killed like he did. Shot down, had his little girl by the hand, and he was buried off there amongst strangers. Ma asked for his picture to be placed over her heart when she was buried. Uncle Will's voice trembled. I did not like the way the talk had turned. I wanted to know all about my folks, but I liked the funny stories better. Edna and Ida were catching some lightning bugs for me. I asked Uncle Will why the light was on the back end of the bug, and he said, "Well, I guess they are like some folks, more interested in where they've been than where they're going." I was sitting in Aunt Nance's lap. I knew to not try to sit in Uncle Will's lap. I could ride on his back or walk holding his hand, but I could not crawl up in his lap because he had a sore on his leg, a burn he had received when a baby. This sore never got well during his whole life. Eva had made a gnat smoke by burning some old rags. Aunt Nance turned her apron up over my arms to protect them from the gnats. I think if there was a hall of fame for articles of clothing, our mountain women's aprons would have been placed in the most honored spot. Everyone wore aprons, dark ones on weeky days, and white ones trimmed in lace or ruffles with Hamburg, all with 2 big pockets tied in the back with a large bow made with the broad sash. These were the Sunday go-to-meeting ones, but more useful than you could imagine. The pockets held their tobacco or a piece of gingerbread to be given to the children while they were at church. The pockets also came in handy to hold seeds to plant when at work. By taking each corner of the bottom hem and tying them through the band at either side, they had a bag to use to carry anything. Chips for a fire, eggs, little chickens, to pick beans, salad, wild greens, apples, and when a child was sitting in a lap, these aprons could be used as a blanket to keep off gnats, the heat from the fire, or to hide an exposed breast when letting the child nurse. Aunt Nance had used her apron to flap at that old gander to scare him. She had used it to wipe away my tears. The apron could also be taken off and tied over the head when caught in a rain shower. Yeah, these old-fashioned aprons sure had an important place in our lives. Next morning, when we started home, there was a disagreement on which way we should go back. We stopped at the mouth of the holler, which, by the way, is called Carter's Branch. Veda and Frances was for coming back the same way we had gone. Renda was for coming up Alum Cave because she wanted to stop at Aunt Nance Johnson's to see if she had any fall bean seed to spare. Edna wanted to come that way because they would also pass Sambo Johnson's house. Edna and Dorsey Johnson were good friends, and Edna wanted to see her. Well, that's 2 for one way and 2 for the other, Renda said. Let's leave it up to Verna Mae. Just so we get home in time to do our work again dark is all that really matters. Which is the longest way, I asked. Then I will get to ride more. And so it was decided that we would come back home by the way of Alum Cave. It didn't seem very important at the time, but that small decision could have been a major turning point in my life. For on our way home, I saw my future husband for the first time. If I had not met him then, would we have met at a later time in life? If we had not married, who would my children and grandchildren have been? I'm not asking you for information. I know what I think. I just wanted to see what you believe about these things. We stopped at Aunt Nance Johnson's and Renda got her bean seed. Aunt Nance Johnson was my father's oldest sister. The other Aunt Nance was my mother's sister. As it was close to dinner time, Aunt Nance would have us to stay and eat with her. When I learned she was having home-cured salt bacon for dinner, they could not have dragged me away. Everyone had meat during the first of the winter, but this was way up in the spring. Our meat had been used up for weeks. We were soon on our way. As this was Sunday, no one was working. Every house we passed, the folks came out to the road and talked with us, asking us to come in, asking about our father, and saying, "Why don't you just get down and come in and stay all night?" Nowhere in the world will you find a more friendlier people than our mountain folks, willing to share their food with their friends and neighbors. When we came to Shade Sloane's house, his wife Larcy was standing at the gate with her son Elbert in her arms. We stopped to talk a few words, and one of the older girls made a comment about what a pretty baby she had. Larcy said, "I wish you could see Willie. He is as pretty as a doll." She always thought more of Willie than any of her other children, and as strange as it seems, none of the others ever resented this. They just accepted it as matter of fact. "Willie, Willie," she hollered, "come around here and let these girls see how pretty you are." In a few minutes around the house came a small boy. I know now he was about 8 years old, but he wasn't any larger than I was at 5. He was riding a stick horse, a piece of rope for a bridle. He had on a long shirt but no pants, typical clothes for small boys then. He did not stop, just made a circle around the house in a fast lope. All I saw was that long striped shirt and a lot of white hair. A few miles up the road, Renda said, "What's Verna Mae so quiet about? Is she going to go to sleep?" And Frances, thinking to tease me, said, "No, I guess she's thinking about her feller she seed back there." I angrily replied, He is too, my feller. And from that day until this one, he is too, my feller. It took me almost 12 years to make him realize it. When I first awoke that morning, I knew it was going to be a very special day. I've always loved those first few seconds when I'm not quite asleep and yet not fully awake. I try to recall why I was so happy about today as I listened for each one of my family. I never felt quite secure until I knew where they all were. Renda was getting breakfast. I could smell the coffee. Papa was at the barn, probably feeding little Beck. I knew he was happy because I could hear him singing Amazing Grace. I heard Veda calling Old Silk. She would soon return with an overflowing bucket of warm, fresh milk. Frances was feeding the hens. That accounted for everyone except Edna. I opened my eyes to see if she was still in bed, and at once I knew why today was going to be the happiest day of my life. There on the back of a chair hung my new dress, long bloomers to match with real elastic at the top and bottom of each leg, just long enough so about 1 inch showed below the hemline of the dress, new patent leather strapped slippers, and the all-despised white stockings. I had put them there last night, for today was going to be my first day of really and truly school. I had gone to school with my sisters ever since I could remember, if Papa wasn't at home. That was the only way they could get to go. The teacher was an old friend, so he allowed this. Often they would take a quilt and make me a pallet in the corner out of the way, and I would sleep. The teacher would sometimes give me a piece of chalk, and I would try to write all over the place. Every child in the district big enough to walk was taken to school on the last day. It was a well-observed custom for the teacher to treat the scholars with stick candy on the last day. They also told the ones who would be moved up a grade next year. Only the 8th graders had a test, and they had to go to Heinemann to take it. They might have a spelling bee. The braver ones would say pieces. But this day was not to be like that. Today my name would be on the roll call. The teacher would call my name, and I would shout, "Present," just like everyone else. The week before, Papa rode little Beck to Heinemann and got our books for us. Edna had a whole armful. I had only one. I already knew all the pictures in it. I also had a big red-black tablet and a penny pencil. I jumped out of bed and began to put my new things on. Renda heard me and called, "No, not until you wash and eat." And I answered, "Oh, well, I don't think I eat any. I was just too happy." "Please, Renda, can't I take my dinner like the other kids do, can I?" "No, you cannot. We live too close, and anyway, you might get hurt playing at noon." "All right, but I'm going to bring everyone home with me that I can beg to come." "I don't care. I will have a plenty for everyone. Now later on, I might let you take your dinner in a bucket on wash day, because you know I'm so busy on wash." "Yeah, I know," I sang. Wash day, snack day, snack day." Soon I was dressed and kissed her goodbye and was on my way. Some of the larger boys were raising the flag. We all lined up and repeated the allegiance. Then we marched to our seats, and before sitting down, we sang America. The teacher read 1 or 2 chapters from his Bible, then classes began. Those teachers must have had the skill of a chess player to maneuver the classes to include 3 or 4 separate subjects for all 8 grades. True, we only had 2 privies, marked boys and girls. Anyone wanting to be excused raised his hand and, receiving a yes nod from the teacher, placed his book in the door. As long as the book was there, no one else was allowed to leave. Of course, if anyone tried to take advantage of this privilege and stayed too long, the teacher would notice and send someone after them or go to the door and call his or her name. There was a drilled well in the yard and a bucket and dipper. No one was allowed to drink from the dipper. A lot had those little collapsible tin cups, and some made paper cups by folding a sheet of paper. We had a large open fireplace and a coal house filled each year with coal. The teacher usually gave someone a quarter a week to come early and build a fire. I remember the house as always being cozy and warm. The seats were wooden and very hard. The back of each seat made a desk for the one sitting behind. They were placed in long rows the length of the schoolhouse, facing the teacher's desk. It was not made of logs, and it did have a double-laid floor, meaning there was no cracks, and there was 3 glass windows on each side. The back end was painted black to be used as a blackboard. I have very pleasant memories of my first year at school, and I was very proud of it. Do you blame me for crying when 35 years later I sat in my own living room and heard over nationwide television a description of Caney? A wilderness, a God-forsaken place with no schools. None of the folks could read or write, living in small log cabins with dirt floors and no windows, without sense enough to bathe or wear shoes. And when the program went on to say that even then, the middle 50s, Caney still had no roads, no mechanics, and no cars, I wondered what that was sitting in my garage that the salesman had sold me the year before for a new Chevrolet truck. The first year I went to school was the last year that building was to be used as a schoolhouse. The next year, a new, much larger one was built on the hill near the Summer Slone graveyard at the mouth of Trace. The old schoolhouse was turned into a dwelling house and wasn't torn down until 20 years later. The new schoolhouse was much larger, 4 large rooms and 1 small room. A coal furnace was supposed to heat the place, but I remember when it was cold, we had to wear our heavy coats inside. The largest room even had a stage with 2 dressing rooms, a place to put on programs. We also had plenty of cloakrooms, a new thing for us. I did not like the change. For one thing, there was no playground. We still had the 2 little houses, one marked boys, one girls, but they were so far away that by the time you got there, you had forgotten what you came for. We no longer had the close and friendly relationship. We were now among strangers. We were not all kinfolks as before. My teacher was one of Mrs. Lloyd's fotched-on teachers. I don't remember her name. I do remember a few things. She had a beautiful white marble paperweight on her desk. It might have been a copy of a classic sculpture. Our parents were scandalized when they learned the teacher had a naked woman on her desk. Some of them sent her word if she wanted to keep it, she had better hide it. We were all scared to death of her. When asked a question, even if we knew the answer, we would rather murmur, I don't know, than risk her ridicule or that blank look on her face when we used a typical hillbilly word or expression that she had no way of understanding. One day we were talking about flags, and we mentioned the Flag Rock, a high rock on top of a hill on Short Fork. It is supposed to be the highest point anywhere in Knott County. We still call it the Flag Rock. A long time ago, some man visited Caney and placed a flag on a high pole on top of this rock. It did not stay very long, for an old man climbed up there and took the flag down and used it to make himself a pair of long-handle underwear. I guess we all have a warm place in our hearts for our flag, but that flag kept that old man warm all over for many a cold winter. Some say the man who left the flag was John Fox Jr. I have been told that he did visit Caney once, gather material for one of his books, I guess. He stayed one night with my father and the next night with Henry C. Short. After he left, they found some of the notes he had lost. In describing the night he had spent with Papa, he stated that a snake got in bed with him. My father got very mad when he read this. He said, "Yeah, a snake was in my bed, a 2-legged snake." I have my opinion of a man that will eat a feller's grub and then tell lies on him. And I fed his horse, too. That was unusual because our mountain folks always took feed with them to feed their horses when they went to stay all night. Anyway, however the flag got there, we were telling our teacher about what had been told, and I said, "Papa told me you could use a spyglass and see this flag from London." The teacher laughed. "Your father does not know any geography. It would be ridiculous to say you could see so far." "Papa knows everything," I proudly retorted. I could hardly wait until I got home to reaffirm my belief in what I thought Papa had told me. Didn't you tell me you could see the flag upon Flag Rock from London if you used a spyglass? No, honey, I said from Heinemann, and you can, 'cause I have. It's true, I don't know as much geography as your teacher, but I do know that London is in Old England. Is London further away than Heinemann, I asked. Yeah, a whole lot further. You see, London is across the waters, and that's where all our forefathers were from. Well, I don't like to be made fun of. Why didn't she explain it to me like you did? I expect she ought to, but you can keep from being laughed at. Always laugh with someone. Never laugh at anyone or let them laugh at you. Always laugh with them. It's much easier. If you can learn to laugh at your own self, it will help you over many a hard spot in your life. I've always remembered that and have taught my children the same lesson. I agree, I'm not as perfect as my father was in laughing at myself, but I am still trying, and it has made life a lot easier and happier. Another thing our new teacher taught us was drawing. She would have us to copy the outline of leaves and to color the pictures of apples, grapes, birds, and so on. I loved this very much. I never got to be very good at it, but I sure enjoyed it. The parents objected to this. They said it was a waste of good paper, and they did not send their young'uns to school for such foolishness. Willie did not go to the same school that I did. His parents lived in another district. I wish we had gone to school together when we were small. I made that same statement to one of his nieces once when we were sharing the same ward in the Whitesburg Hospital, and she said, "You better be glad you did not, for he was one grain the meanest little boy I ever seed. Why, he would tie our hair to the backs of our seats. You know how little girls wore them, 2 long plaits? Well, he would tie them together to the seat, and when we got up, it would pert nigh jerk our heads off. One day he took all our dinner buckets and carried them up to the top of a big sycamore tree, that one in the schoolyard, and he hung them on a limb away up in the top of that tree," she laughed. "Well," I said, "I guess he got a whipping about every day." "No," she mused, "come to think of it, I don't recollect of him ever getting whipped. He was too slick to get caught, for one thing. And then it's funny, but everyone liked him, even the teacher. Mean as he was, he just had a nature everybody liked." She also told me of a dog Willie took to school with him that he taught to play ball. When the boys were playing round town or ante over, the dog would retrieve the ball and bring it to Willie, thus helping them to win the game. We'll stop right there today. That's a good stopping place right at the end of a chapter. Another fascinating look into Verna Mae's life. Love all the humor throughout it. Lots of different parts in this book in this part of the book that I really enjoyed, that pricked my mind with memories, other connections to Appalachia, to my life in Appalachia especially. I really loved that part where we're on the way home and it was on Sunday, and everybody they went by come out and told them to come in and stay a while. You ought to just spend the night. I love that. I love the hospitality that you can find in the mountains of Appalachia. Still till today, you can still find people like that. I have a great video, I'll link to it, about hospitality, about some of the favorite sayings, and that's one of them. You ought to just spend the night. So I really, really enjoyed that part. Of course, in this part of the book, you can kind of see again, previous one we read where she was talking about being called a hillbilly. You can kind of see that same thing here, how she's kind of comparing her life to what she hears her life's supposed to be like from either, whether it's newspapers or magazines or whatever, or even TV at this point, and thinking how wrong they are, how wrong that she really did want to go to school, and not just her, all the other kids, and that they really did know how to read and how to write and how to bathe and take care of themselves. And yes, they may have unusual customs and cultures and the way they talked and those kind of things, but they weren't literally the way that they were portrayed. They were being portrayed wrong. Especially, it's funny when she says, they say no one has cars. I wonder what that is in my garage that I just bought. So that's kind of an interesting peek into. You can see that maybe Verna Mae was really aware of that throughout her life. I've been aware of that throughout my life too. And the beginning part too, really funny, hearing about the stunts and the tricks that her daddy, Kit and I, that he pulled, her and him and her uncle, as her uncle was describing it, really funny. I don't know which is funnier, taking the door off or the making Matt run through the town naked, both of those. Or you can just know that those were told for years and years and years and passed down through the family. Reminds me of stories like that I've heard from Pap or whoever, telling about jokes and tricks and pranks that they pulled on each other. That little part's funny, that in the part when she's talking about that Matt, he's running through the town, and then they say, people saying, what's wrong? And they're like, it's our brother, he's crazy as a Bessie bug. Someone just the other day asked me if I knew what a Bessie bug was, and it's probably one of those things that's called different things in different parts of Appalachia, but for me, a Bessie bug would be like a black beetle, and a lot of times I see them around our wood pile. They're really shiny black, and they get pretty big sometimes, but if you watch them, they just kind of go about doing whatever it is that they do. But I thought that was interesting, and also that how she fondly remembered, that she couldn't climb up in her uncle's lap because of the injury that he had, and how, just think about that, what fortitude he must have had. He'd had that place since he was a child that never healed, and it was so bad that a little kid couldn't climb up in his lap, yet he obviously, worked, had a family, all those things. So I thought that was interesting. I wonder if it was just tender, if it never fully healed. It seems like it would have had to, the skin would have had to have healed, so I don't know what exactly she meant by that, but that was the interesting part. And then also the gnat smoke. I grew up with Pap making gnat smokes. We would go out in the of an evening, go out into the yard and maybe have a weenie roast, we called them, or something, or just sit out there and talk. Maybe we'd have a watermelon if it's in the summer, watermelon time, and he would build a little gnat smoke. And what's a gnat smoke? It's just a little smoky fire, usually with a rag or something like that, or something that's not going to burn really good, that's just going to produce a lot of smoke, and that wards off the gnats and the skeeters, keep them from biting you. The part about the aprons, I loved that. I can remember my Granny Gazzy always had an apron on, always. Granny wears aprons some, but I wouldn't think as much as Gazzy did. And I never really wore aprons when I was first married. I didn't wear them very much either. I usually just wore old clothes around the house, and it didn't matter if I got them dirty or not. Trying to let my wind chimes calm down a little bit. It's getting windy out here today, so you can hear me. But when I worked at the college, one time we were having a big doings, as we would say, at our college, and it was a lot of colleges from out in the state were coming to visit, and so I had to pitch in and help in other areas than I normally would work. And so a lot of that was serving food and things like that. And I remember I worked with a lady, and she had an apron on over her nice clothes, and like the first day, and I thought, she's really smart, I should do that. So the next day I wore an apron, and it was so handy because I had pockets, and I could put my keys to get in and out of the buildings and that kind of stuff in my pocket. So after that I kind of realized, well, no wonder aprons are so handy. So now I can't hardly do anything in the house as far as cooking in the kitchen and stuff like that I don't wear an apron. So I really loved that part about how they had dried kids' tears and carried eggs and all those different things, used as a blanket to cover up a child if they were cold, or to keep them from the gnats. So that was wonderful. I've seen, and you probably have too, there's like a little internet, it's not a meme really, but a little thing that's like aprons, and it tells all the different usages. I bet you've seen that too. The part when she's talking about school, about how the teachers, it was kind of like they were really good. The teacher was a really good chess player because he could manage all those different grades and all those different subjects. When I was growing up at Martins Creek School, it's not like that today, but in those days there wasn't as many students, and several of our classes were split like that. So when I was in 6th grade, I also had 7th graders. When I was in 5th grade, I had 4th graders. Probably when I was in 4th grade, I had 5th graders. But anyway, there were several. Even when I was in 7th grade, I was in a class with 8th graders. Then when I was an 8th grader, I had 7th graders in there. And just one teacher teaching everything. So I liked that part. She's right. I look back and think about my teachers, Mr. Caldwell, Mr. Smart, Mr. Moffat, how they kept up with everything they had to do and taught out of 2 different sets of books with a classroom full of, you know, what were we doing? I don't even remember. What were we doing? I guess we were doing homework when the other class was doing theirs. I can't remember those details, but it just all worked. You know, it really worked well. And then when I went off to a bigger school and I didn't have anything like that anymore, I was right where I should be with my lessons, with my studies. I wasn't behind or anything like that. So it's interesting to think about how much things have changed since those days. And then probably the thing I'll end with is just her daddy, Kit and I's wisdom of being able to laugh at yourself. That helps so much, and I'm not always good at that, but if you can just laugh at yourself, it's kind of like once you get pride out of the way, you can just laugh at yourself and let it go. It kind of like takes the sting out, I guess is how I would look at it. A lot of times when I can just kind of laugh at myself and give myself some grace and admit I'm not perfect, I mess up all the times and I do some really things that are not really smart sometimes and goofy, you know, just mess up on accident or whatever. Or maybe somebody corrects me and I know, well, they are right, even though that stings, they're right. Once you can just kind of laugh at yourself and let go of that pride, it does make life easier. He's right. That's not always easy to do, though. So I hope that you'll leave a comment and tell me what you enjoyed from this part of the book, and I hope you'll drop back by next week. I'm really enjoying Verna Mae, and I hope you are, and we've got to see what happens next.